20th art studio based in Seoul, South Korea. Actually, this is my first English presentation in my life, except in the university. So I think I might make new world record of being worst English speaker in this year in Eyeo. Anyway, I'm happy to make new record and more than happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'm Elliot, the other half, and I'm from England. And this image kind of demonstrates a bit about what it looks like when we're actually behind a desk. Usually we spend most of our time in front of the desk, plugging things in, building things. When we finally get behind the desk, it's this kind of exhausted look, wearing coats and scarves, and trying to make some sense of things.
So this is our studio in Seoul. We spend most of our time in this beautiful space. And actually, this was the most hectic moment that we were working for a project which is called Assembly in 2012.
So it kind of mirrors our process, this little video. On one side, we got kind of almost like a theater of technology and viewers on one side. And then on the other side, there's some kind of objects which everything gets channeled through. So it's always a physical realization of the project, which everything gets channeled through.
So we've been working together since 2009. One of the strong motivation which keeps us being kimchi and chips is that we have very distinct, different perspective. I have a background in art and design, and then Elliot has a background in physics, and also language, culture, gender, even height are really different. You know?
So, when we first saw each other's work, I was working on this project called Wiremap with some guys from New York. And we were at this conference, and there with a lot of design schools. And I was showing this project. I was really proud of it because it had this kind of possibilities for creating these floating forms in space using a lot of math. So I was doing MATLAB at the time. I was coming out of uni. And Mimi came over and she said, "Wow, this is superficial."
I'm sorry.
And I was like, "Okay,
See my terrible English."
So I went over to go check her project out, and she had this calendar which is made for autistic children, which helps them to kind of make a routine out of their week and express themselves and create little artifacts to communicate with themselves and their parents. And I started to realize then that if I really wanted to create these objects of these aesthetic objects, I needed to really consider a design from kind of an established viewpoint.
And this photo shows how we explore same theme with a different approach. For instance, while I'm exploring the color with the watercolor paints, he is exploring hacking the projector, color wheel of a projector. So his experiments always takes much more money, actually. It's true.
So this experiment... And this experiment was the idea is you take a color wheel out of a projector, and you can trade color for time, and that means you can do things really, really quick with a projector. And this is part of a research project with Tokyo University and Alvaro Casanelli. We haven't got time today to talk about this one now.
So Drawing in the Air, which is the title of our talk, is an inspirational theme of our ongoing project, our ongoing research between realm of the material and immaterial. So in general, people think material is something existence, something existing, something physical, tangible, visible. And on the other hand, immaterial is something invisible, something not being perceived. So we easily think immaterial means nothing. So we really love to shake this conception in order to find new meaning of material and immaterial, as well as in order to see what happened when they cross the boundary to each other's side. So today we are going to talk about our obsession with material, space, and technique. So we love to work with the physical material. And let me show some scene of a soul. we pronounce soul. Maybe you pronounce soul. So Seoul is a very fascinating city in terms of exploring various material and components in a really easy way. So there are a lot of big wholesale markets in middle of central in Seoul, and each shop is specialized in specific materials such as fabric, thread, boxes, cardboard boxes, electronic components, and extra.
And like it's always separated into like, well, in like the really big parts of town where it's all about materials, it's separated into like city blocks. So you'll have like a city block of generators, then like a city block of wires, and then one of plastics and PVCs. So you kind of like, as you go around, it's like you really spatialize your view of materials.
So these photos show our history of exploring material over the last 5 years, and material already has certain information and idea for use in creating certain work, but we think it is still very open-ended, and especially it can be whatever, especially when they are touched with technology and aesthetic, artistic concepts.
So like here we got like one different material for year for like the past 5 years. And like the one thing they've all kind of got in common is they're all like everyday materials, right? They're not kind of like difficult to manufacture or have a lot of technology already inside them. These are kind of quite familiar things that we want to investigate.
So we will briefly talk about how we play with the material over the last 5 years. So in 2010, we used the cardboard boxes as a space. People can store their memories and their presence.
And like in 2011 was the first time we did something with living material. So this is a project with bamboo trees where we project into the tree and we also scan where the projection is landing. And we create these kind of visual forms inside the tree, but we also talk to the tree in the language it understands, which is light. So we're kind of triggering growth inside the tree as well. And over the period of the installation, we create an effect on the shape of the tree based on how we channel light inside it.
So after Literary, we started considering of using digital light as a semi-material and more focused on aesthetic where material and digital light meet. So in 2012, we created a permanent installation for private collection in Busan, which is the southeast tip of Korea. And then,
Yeah, and then it's like we've got like all this material in the middle, and then on the outside there's 5 video projectors and 5 cameras, and we think about like each projector being like a million spotlights, and each one of these spotlights is a line that travels through the air and it hits something, and when it hits it, it makes a little pool of light. And we think of these pool of lights a bit like LEDs, so instead of thinking about like putting an image onto it, we think more about like having all these like little pool of lights that we control inside it.
So Elliot's technology made me getting crazy with material. So we started to explore new challenges in terms of playing with the material and digital light and looking at fragile one-dimensional materials. So last year, for the commission exhibition of the Seoul Art Space, we used the strings in order to weave 3D geometric sculpture in large space. So, and we did painting digital light onto strings in very accurate way. So we will talk about detail of this project later.
And this is a recent project. We're still not 100% sure on the title, but for the sake of this presentation, it's called Lunar Surface, which is different from the corner. But we've got like 6 or 7 we're still playing. And this is another one in Seoul, and we're playing with like silk and wind to make wind paintings, we call it. Where anyway, we're going to talk about this one in detail again later on.
So we want to talk about more detail of line segment space, which we've done last year. So personally, I kind of tried not to make a favorite artist and artwork in general, because I'm not finding or waiting for an inspiration from outside of my world. I think best inspiration always comes from my routine work process. So if I stop working, no inspiration at all. So I think the most typical excuse to procrastinate creating artwork is usually people saying, I need inspiration. Or maybe I don't have inspiration to get started. So, but this artist is an exceptional to me. Her name is Eyeo, maybe Gego in English. So she is Venezuelan artist, and she's really well known as a geometric abstract artist and kinetic artist. So this is one of her artwork called reticular. Sorry. So she weaves the volume in the space without start and end, and then she created many spaces inside the spaces. So it is like she created new canvas or new space with the material to draw something in the air. So I found kind of a common obsession between her and me, which is an obsession with the geometric. So I love to kill my time to draw geometric form using compass and ruler. So like repeating, literating, drawing shape over and over is like some sort of a meditation. So we started really quick drawing in the paper and tried to think how to move these geometric lines into real world, into real space, like what Eyeo did. So yes, obviously, we thought we would use physical materials for the geometric sculpture in the dark space, also digital light as a painting material. Well, and then as usual, we went to the material market and bought strings, and then just immediately started creating things while we drew. And we wanted to make some sort of a distinct contrast, really strong contrast, using white thin string in black, dark, empty space. Well, in general, in our studio, we don't have a long idea development session. We just move and start trying. Just even if it is a really vague idea, we just start making. So making hands dirty and feeling real object is really much more powerful than considering idea in the desk.
So like at this stage of the project, what we're really trying to figure out is the natural constraints of the material, or like what the material is naturally good at. So what we did was we just like did a really simple, naive technical test. And we're not trying to test out any new technical ideas here. We're just trying to like see what it looks like. Like what is the kind of like aesthetic quality of just simply projecting a few pixels onto these strings?
This is a mask image which captured by two projectors, and which we used for the first prototype with the strings. So I just redraw it later with a pencil and paper because it's just so beautiful to see some sort of a different view from different perspectives onto this abstract shape.
So like this is a rendition of the scan data taken from the projectors. So the projectors scan the strings, and then we've kind of got a photo from the point of view of the projectors. And we use this for like some tests. So like I said, it's like a technically naive approach to study the material. That's kind of the intention.
So we ended up having a physical mock-up and mask image, and also this is a 3D real sculpture in the space. It's not drawing in the paper, and it's all lines and really thin lines. So we really enjoyed the contrast it created and seeing the visual mass flow through the web. Then we draw the sketch again based on the venue we would put this installation.
So like we look for the most basic and intuitive tools to do this. So we started out with SketchUp and like started like pushing some lines around. And the idea is to like one is to like get like an overall design, like what's it going to be like in terms of big shape, and like maybe like how do we get the projectors around that. And then the other thing is like what's like the rules of construction, like is it, are we going to have like lots of like cubes in there, or like what are the kind of principles we're going to use across the whole canvas. But this wasn't the most intuitive of tools to use, it turns out.
So I have been working on making different ideas with the SketchUp, but having a lot of trouble while Elliot was in Manchester. At the time we were working from a distance. So then one day he flew in and said, "I've got something for you." And I just thought, oh, probably he bought something in duty-free shop in order to give me. Wow, it's surprising. And then he just opened his laptop and they showed this application. Ta-da! This is for you, Mimi. Now you can draw. It's like simulation. You can draw whatever with this application.
So like we made this like custom CAD app to basically like it's the way you build the lines in it is it's supposed to mirror the way you build the lines in the real world. So you can't make one that like ends at a point in space. You have to build lines off of other lines, and the interface is like super simple, and it gives you like these readouts. So you can like say how much string you need to buy, and also like it gives you you can like then analyze this, and the other side like how is it going to be projected onto, because this data is all in our format now. So like it's really important to communicate ideas clearly. Wait a sec, what was that? Usually there's like a whole slide on this, but I'm just going to briefly mention. So like whenever you use anything like that somebody else has made, there's going to be loads of implicit ideas already in it, right? So like we were really cautious that when we use tools, especially during the design process, that maybe what we're going to end up doing is like there might be like a tool in SketchUp which does something like this, and then we get to the real world and we're like, okay, now we want to do it like this because this is what it's like in SketchUp, right? And this happens as well with like a lot of open source things. Like you share something open source, people get your code, and then they have this certain API on top of it, and that kind of like is the base on which they make their decisions.
The making period is always the best time to me and Elliot, and so constantly keep going on and working is always a great moment. So this is a video which we were trying to make the string sculpture in the venue.
So like whilst like the physical structure's being made, I'm like working on some like calibration technologies. So like we were saying, the point of making that design app to start with is to like make a node from which we can branch in different directions. We can kind of like agree on something quite early on, which lets me go, okay, now I understand some challenges I've got to solve, and Mimi goes, okay, I know some challenges she's got to solve. And then whilst we're doing these things, we're kind of like trying these things out in the venue, and then we kind of rejoin.
And the web was created spontaneously in the venue. There wasn't actually a specific design to create it. So we had some rules for construction, but it doesn't restrict at all.
So like, for example, one of the rules which like we were thinking when we saw it is that we didn't really want like a triangle where another line passes through it. Because like in computer graphics, it's kind of like an invalid thing. And if we wanted to like play out this aesthetic, we thought that would be something which we wouldn't want to use when we were using our algorithms later on.
So this is a finished arrangement.
And then we can start to see like emergent patterns, like certain angles are like populating it, and like the certain lengths and shapes, like these little pyramids on the floor, which we like start to realize we're going to be working with. And then like after that, like after constructing everything, we have to calibrate all the things in the space. So we've got like camera, a couple of projectors, and a lot of this is like checking out chessboards, writing simple algorithms, and then like a lot of things were calibrated just with respect to the room. So we had like these markers in the room, and they're usually basically where the string hits the wall, and everything's calibrated against that. So in the end, it was like quite simple, the calibration procedure. And that lets us triangulate to find out, when we project into it, where are all our pixels ending up. So this mesh here is showing the projectors at the top. All these dots there are the projected pixels which are landing on strings.
And then we rejoined together, sitting together after working on our separate branches.
And we like started developing a sequence of brushes. We call it a brush, like a brush being like an effect or something like that. So we had this like set of brushes to tell a motion story. So So like the first thing we explored, the first like brush we explored was to have like, just being able to like identify a line. That was kind of like a first principle to use. And then we started exploring visual mass, which is this ongoing concept in our work, where we want to create something that feels like it has mass in front of you. And this is to do with like being able to triangulate the position. That's what gives you this ability. And maybe we'll show you one more brush, and then we'll go into the next work. So then this brush is to identify the direction of the lines. So what we do is we kind of have this vector field of like a vector field of direction inside it, and we play it out by choosing lines which match that direction. Right? So like if you want to like get all the lines which like go from like bottom left to top right, then it's going to select all those. And it kind of aliases, it kind of jumps to like certain angles. You see, and that's because like when we're constructing it, just naturally there's certain angles which are kind of more common than others. So like some of them are like, it almost flashes when it meets the angle.
Let's talk about obsession with space. So this means space in Korean and Chinese. It means actually empty gap, but in Eastern idea, it means actually still something there. So it's empty but still existing, it's empty but still something there. So it is like a blank material, but literally it's also one of material. So that's what I think. Space is also one of our material. And here's a new work that we created to draw with the empty space, which is called lunar surface.
So usually when we make a rendition of our work, the output is like a physical object, like a gallery object or something in public space. And this time the output is naturally photographic. It's an imprint of something that's happened. So it's like an artifact of when we ran this thing and where we did it.
And then we came up with a concept to follow the motion of a fabric to paint something into the air. So this is our studio, which we tested with the fabric with wind.
And then we did the tests again with like natural wind outside. And what's happening is that we've got like this idea of a sphere inside the computer, which is being shown on a computer screen on the right. And then we render that sphere into the real world by using this sheet of fabric as a boundary. So as the sheet of fabric moves by the wind, it presents a cross-section of the sphere and that fabric. So in the long exposure, you then render out the sphere.
So this is the photo test we've done in our studio. We found a really surrealist scene through this test, like a moon floating low in ordinary space. So the sphere is recurring symbol in our work.
Like we have to think like the sphere is like, it's like demonstrating the birth of a new principle. That's kind of where it comes in.
So this is then our first test using natural wind to render the moon on our rooftop.
And then this is like a series of images we created recently, which are a bit more final, a bit more complete. So this is like showing more like a chaotic wind pattern. And this is like kind of like showing some new types of glitch which appear. So like there's like a new language of glitch based on how the fabric moves. So like if it doesn't move fully, then like we've got like one stroke here where it comes up halfway, another one where it just went too fast. So like this creates these artifacts in the output. And we also get this aesthetic of error where the front of the sphere is actually quite smooth, but the back has got these like hard rings, and that's where like the connect that we're using has like a depth resolution, right? So like when you get to a certain point, it starts jumping, like there's a depth resolution.
And again, we tried with the natural conditions. we really want to create a series of these images in different outdoor locations. That's our next plan. And then we are looking for a gallery to show these images and to demonstrate the installation.
So the way we want to like present it is like the images first, and then after you've seen that, then you can see the installation running in the gallery space. So here, like you can see the layout where there's like a projector and a Kinect, and the Kinect is scanning the fabric, and then the projector is giving back a response. And in the middle is the computer, which has got the idea of the sphere, right? So the idea of the thing that's being presented.
So obsession with technique.
So this part is it's about like this idea called digital emulsion. So a workshop we had here, we called it Digital Emulsion Workshop, and it's like a theory of materials, a theory of new materials. So like this is rust, and like this doesn't like have material properties the way an airline part has. You know, it's not like what's its magnetic properties or all this kind of stuff. It's it's got this like, aesthetic property which is useful to a designer or an artist. Like in Anish Kapoor's memory, perhaps he selected rust because it like makes the object almost lazy in the space, right? It makes it kind of like relaxed into the gallery. But now like we've got like a new taste for materials based on like our copy-paste instinct we've got. So like the paradigms of digital animation start to enter reality where we want materials that can like animate in ways or like take on unconstrained forms. So we kind of think that like maybe what we're doing sometimes is like it's like a new type of material technology. But like if you look at traditional material technology, it has this kind of definition. So it's like, this is like a common quote where people say in the moment, like in terms of engineering, a lot of the problems will be solved through creating new materials. But this is the way they define like what material properties are. Like, I mean, I don't think it's like important to an artist that this thing, well, I mean, radiological properties just sounds like not the kind of stuff you're considering when you're thinking about the aesthetic qualities of material, right? So one thing which we think is an interesting marker is this idea of aesthetics of error, which is a term from physics. Like when you have error on something, it's the limit to which that thing is defined. So if you've got like if you know where something is in space, then you know that to a certain error bounds, right? You know it's like plus or minus 3 centimeters. So when the Kinect sees that piece of fabric, it's got certain error bounds, a certain like resolution it's got, right? And the aesthetic of that resolution is kind of gives away a lot about the material. So the way in which like the material deteriorates like shows you the ego of the material, right? And if we look at like something like this on the left is like a stereo image from a Firefly camera 10 years ago. And the way that deteriorates is kind of like everything gets smoothed out, and like big chunks get disappeared. Like there's like really, really strong depth planes. And then the new Kinect is very different. Like although it's got like a lot more detail, like the way it deteriorates, it's got a very different personality. It comes apart in this kind of grain, right? Like individual pixels work differently. And like this is I really love James's idea about people are gonna in the future have like an Instagram filter for a Kinect, where like they're gonna have this like really great 3D camera, and they're gonna like apply the Kinect One Instagram filter, which makes it look like the picture on the left. Because like this is like the ego of the device at the moment, right? So like if we look at like what's the ego of the projection mapping outputs, this is something which like we're very related to in our field, but we often see here is like the ego of the output seems to like come from like the animation software. It's almost like an inverse special effect where the thing that you want to create gets dipped into reality and brought back out or something like that. So the creation process is obviously still like still very strong, but the kind of the way in which it comes apart isn't really a material property, I'd say. So like we have like projection mapping to start with, right? And like there's a lineage of like different projects which like use surfaces to like bring the current language of screen-based media into the real world. And then we've got like 3D scanning projects, which bring the aesthetic of like the way the computer sees things into the in front of our eyes, right? And if we like bring these two together, what we end up thinking about is like taking the aesthetic of the way the computer sees something and then reprojecting that back onto the object. So this is like what we're doing in our work, with the computer seeing the object and it's reprojecting onto it. That was a fun effect, wasn't it? So another term for this could be reprojection scanning. So we have this duality, a dualism between the virtual and the physical. And there's no kind of like design in one realm and like use it in the other. It's like these things are happening simultaneously. You create an equivalence between your virtual version and your digital version. It's not like you have an image over here which gets transferred to pixels, which is used over there. Like the particles on both sides are equivalent. You've got the particles which are these pixels in space, and they're also in the computer. So like as a quick primer, made this like section. The projector is used as both a scanner and an augmenter of a scene. Projected pixels become active sensors. So we think of them as like maybe sensor pixels, or some people say maybe sexels, would be like a shortened version. But I don't know if this is like gonna catch on. So they're like the fundamental particle of this new material, right? And the intention is to try and create convergence of the properties of digital and physical materials. And we think of like digital light as being this semi-material as a result. It's got like some material properties and it's got some possibilities which are immaterial, and it meets in the middle in this kind of semi-material state. And like some of our installations aim to create a suspension of this digital semi-material within physical space. The same way like in a milk you've got water and fats, where like they don't mix, but like one's suspended in the other. That's kind of like the way we think about digital and physical within our installations. And thanks to Eyeo, we've written this toolkit for the workshop, which we're going to be giving away. Well, it's online now, and that's kind of like a little like brief intro into this concept through a set of tools.
So based on that concept, we made a Moriarty installation which is called Assembly. So this project is a permanent installation for private collection in Korea. And when I found lots of possibilities in terms of drawing onto any surface, I started thinking of a more complex arrangement. So, which means making Alien working more hard. So we created a cloud of 5,500 blocks suspended in the air, and we all made this by hand every day over the night.
And this is the first installation where we like really thought about this digital emulsion concept, where we're not trying to projection map an image onto it. We're trying to create this boundary, which is like played out by this aesthetic on the blocks. All these little artifacts you see on the blocks are all to do with like the orientation of the camera and the projectors around, and like how things like maybe a little bit overexposed in one place so it can scan correctly, or how things might alias within the sensors. And then we have this kind of dualism between these microscopic effects, which are per face, is like almost like an image, which is playing out that aesthetic of error, and then this macroscopic effect, which is more to do with visual mass, trying to create something that feels real and surreal in the room. So I think it's
We're
question
done.
time.
Yeah, I was just wondering, on the last piece, were you using a Kinect to do the sensor reading or the? to
On the
determine
blocks.
And you could use more than one of them?
Do you mean the final installation with the blocks?
Yeah.
There was no Connect used there.
Okay.
The kind of the realm, like when you get above 5 meters, you can't really calibrate it with a Connect. But also like all of these digital emulsion installations, it's really important to us that the projector is both the scanner and the projector, because then you're kind of just thinking about the pixels which are coming out. You're not thinking about like a mesh or a 3D world which you're mapping, something like that. You're just thinking about like the pixels in the world. You're taking readings of them, then you're using them there. You're playing with them there, and then maybe you make some simulation on the computer. But if you scan it, it's almost like you're making a digital object which you then reproject. But this is trying to find something outside of the computer.
Hi. Have you guys done anything with object recognition, or other than just reprojecting the point cloud? Like you mentioned that you're finding the vectors of the lines that go in a certain direction. Is there some sort of cylinder detection, or have you sort of tried to convert the cloud into primitives?
Well, this for line segment space, the one with all the web of strings, we basically we were there like about 3 nights before it was opening, and I was like writing an algorithm still to try and recognize the lines. And I was just doing it in 2D because it's really great to, when everything's in projector planes, you can just do everything in 2D. And I was getting some results, and I was getting like things come out, and it's like, okay, there's some lines, but still missing some. Okay, let's see if we can get those. But then like in the meantime, what I did was I just set it up so all the people who were waiting for me, because everyone was just like, well, we can't do anything right now, I just set up a manual process so people could do it manually. And after about 3 hours, like the results of that were so much better than the results of this, that it seemed like there was no point in pursuing this, because the accuracy you can get by hand is much better because you can walk around and you can say, okay, that's where the string ends to me as a human, whereas a computer can only see it from this perspective. So that's more analyzing 2D images. In terms of 3D images for assembly, we had some routines to try and recognize the blocks, recognize which block is on which line, recognize which pixel is on which face of which block. But the results were kind of too messy in the end, so like we kind of we didn't have enough time to explore that properly. But it is something we researched, and we were interested in that.
And then have you thought about using actuators or some sort of movable projection other than wind?
There is some projects in that though. So the one at the beginning, which the color wheel comes out, right? The one I was showing you there. That project actually it sends out structured light onto a scene to scan it, and then it cancels out the structured light instantly. So it sends out a 300th of a second of structured light, then it sends a 300th of a second of the opposite of that image. So then you'll just see gray, right? And then it sends a 300th of a second of an actual image, which is a reprojection. And this all happens on the GPU. It comes in from the camera, shipped to GPU, gets decoded, triangulated, inverted to projector space, and then you get a mesh in projector space live. That's the research project with Tokyo University. It's not something we've used in our artwork so far.
And what's the frame rate?
120 frames a second, but it's a sliding window, which means every 1/6 of a frame, you get an entirely new piece of data, but you get updates every 120th of a second.
I was struck by the ephemeral nature of the physical presence of the installations, the ones that are in the gallery with the string and various material forms. And then the last one you showed doesn't really exist. Sort of, you have a way of representing it. And it's a very simple primitive form. Doesn't have the same complexity as some of your physical work. And I'm interested in where you might take the new direction you're taking in terms of representing things like a human form or like a ghost or like things that are evocative and on an emotional level, but lack the physicality of your previous work.
Yeah, well, if like this, you often see these business diagrams where people make like this pyramid and it says it's like this, this, and this, but you always got to get rid of one, right? And like there's almost like this pyramid of like time, space, and color, and if you knock one out, you can get the other two. And they kind of like we're playing around with like knocking out one of these points of the triangle bit by bit and seeing like what happens on the other side. So in terms of like that project, there's a lot of other ways you could knock out time to get space, and we're exploring like especially with like the new Kinect, we'll be able to do it with smaller particles. But also, like, the more you speed that up, the more real time you can get, right?
Hey, thanks so much for this. There's something really frustrating with special effects artists that whenever they make something for film, it's always very believable and very unnoticed, that people just believe it as the film and move on. And I guess with digital artists, with what you guys do, people just a lot of times say, wait, how did you, is this real? And I'm wondering if what your experience is in like how much of your artistic vision versus how much of your technical merits are you able to convey in something? Do you often get stuck on trying to explain to people how it works versus what you intended in it?
Do you want to tell them about the story of the Da Vinci Project not accepting us?
The Vinci Project, which is
With Treat.
oh yeah, we had a really funny story in Seoul. Because when we started developing the tree in our studio with our idea, and then we brought the idea to the Seoul
Art Foundation.
Art Foundation in order to get some funding. And then I did presentation because we had to present in Korean. So one of the first question that I had from jury was what's different using one projector? What's different technology compared to just projecting onto the wall? And then what Elliot answered to me, can I use a swear word? He said, it's a fucking different. This is just 1 pixel, and then we are using 3D voxels. And then we failed to get some funding at the time. And then
But it's
So-
happened like a few times where like someone said, we won't fund this because it won't work.
yeah.
And that comes from an art side. And and that's always the funniest thing to get denied on, right? Because you're like, well, what happened?
But these days it's really easy to get, for us, kind of became easy to get funding in Korea.
Did it?
Yes, I think so. It's just in my podcast. I haven't said to Elliot yet.
That's not true. But like one other story about that as well as like yeah, so at the moment we've got like this new idea, and this happens when we have like a new idea for something that like we haven't physically tested, and like we show it to people and then like it's like this and it's like and these all cross over and then like it makes this thing in the air and then like it's all these mirrors and they're like, so what is it? And then like I make like a rendering and they go like, okay, there's the rendering, like then they'll animate the rendering, they're still like so sometimes you just have to make it and only then will people like really get what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone. You can
Thank
ask us in
you.
your
Thank
chat.